I love it when Jesus' disciples say what the rest of us are thinking. Jesus' teachings have been getting really challenging lately. He's told us to change our relationship with money, to deliberately choose the worst seats at the table. He's said that anyone who wants to be his disciple has to die to themselves a little each day. The disciples, bless their hearts, have taken all of this in stride. That is, until Jesus says this: even if a person wrongs you 7 times a day and each time turns again and asks forgiveness, you must forgive. Suddenly, all of them snap at once. 12 grown men gasp and swoon and squeal, "Lord, increase our faith." Jesus, you're asking too much of us. We're just normal guys who fish for a living. You're going to have to start dishing out spiritual superpowers or else lower the bar a little. Have you ever felt like you're not up to what Jesus is asking? And the disciples seem to have the impression that faith works like a battery charge. The greater the task you seek to accomplish, the more faith power you need available to draw on. Big, saint-sized faith can move mountains and power forgiveness 7 times a day. Little normal person-sized faith might be enough to move an anthill a few inches to the left and forgive the same person up to, let's say, 7 times a year. The disciples feel like toddlers being commanded to lift a Ford F-150. What Jesus is asking doesn't feel the slightest bit reasonable or plausible or possible, or even, being honest, desirable. But Jesus thinks his 12 drama kings had missed something fundamental about what it means to be a disciple. He tells them, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, "May you be uprooted and planted in the sea," and it would obey. These men don't need any more faith. What they need is the will to exercise the smidgen that they've got. And just like me, when I think about jogging, these guys believe that they have a capacity problem, when what they actually have is an attitude problem. Many people have the impression that faith is that feeling you've got in your gut about what you or God are capable of. The trouble is, that feeling changes faster than Midwestern weather. It's affected by sleep quantity and the quality of your last meal. A good song has this same effect on that feeling of faith that a Twinkie has on energy. It produces a quick spike, followed by a crash. Our control over the feeling of faith is pretty minimal moment to moment. But to Jesus, faith isn't a constantly fluctuating personal power level. To Jesus, faith is a direction of movement. To have faith is to orient your daily life around God's dream of the whole world's healing. It's to act as if what Jesus says about God and the world are true. It's to walk in the direction Jesus points. It's to do whatever God wants done. Faith isn't mostly a measure of feelings. It's a measure of feet. And by this definition, you can practice faith when you're feeling it and when you're not. When you're 100% convinced Jesus knows what he's talking about, and when you're harboring some doubts about his sense of direction. When you see exactly how you're going to get to the destination, and when you don't have a clue. This is the kind of faith Jesus practices in his own relationship with God. Even Jesus isn't sure at every moment that he's totally feeling God's direction. But he keeps facing that way anyway. He keeps on moving toward Jerusalem or wherever God is pointing. When we're pointed in God's direction, following God's lead, trying to do what God wants done in the world, God will provide what we need. This is the good news from Jesus. Suppose we're on a mission with God and a tree blocks our path. If that tree needs to be moved for us to get where we're called to go, God will move it. That simple. According to Jesus, whether or not that tree moves doesn't depend on whether you can conjure enough faith power to lift it. Get over yourself. God can move that tree just as easily whether you've got the faith biceps of Thor or a middle school gamer. The only relevant question is whether you have any faith at all. In other words, whether you're on God's road, engaging in God's mission, doing what God wants done. God doesn't transplant trees so that you can clear the ground to grow your own personal palace. If the disciples have a problem right now, it's not that they lack anything that they need. It's that they just don't like what Jesus is saying. All the necessary equipment comes with the discipleship package, but they have to make a choice whether they're really with Jesus or not. Discipleship is not a pick and choose situation. Either Jesus is Lord or he isn't. If he is, he reserves the right to chart the course every day, all the time. He defines the mission. He defines the duties. It's their job to keep moving in the direction he points. It's his job to make sure they have what they need to get there. If you want greater faith, don't close your eyes and wish. Use whatever bit of faith you've got to point your toes in Jesus' direction. Act as you would if everything Jesus says were true. Lead with your feet. Let's hear what Jesus says in Luke 17, verses 4 to 10. Jesus said, "Even if a person wrongs you 7 times a day, and each time turns again and asks forgiveness, you must forgive." The apostles said to the Lord, "Show us how to increase our faith." The Lord answered, "If you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'May you be uprooted and planted into the sea,' and it would obey you." When a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of the sheep, does his master say, "Come in and eat with me"? No, he says, "Prepare my meal, put on your apron, and serve me while you eat. Then you can eat later." And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told to do? Of course not. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, "We are unworthy servants who've simply done our duty." I'm Meghan Good, and this is Reading Jesus. Thanks so much for joining me for a few minutes in Luke, and I'll see you next time.